might say something amazing.
Hello, everyone. We are on a pre-record today, and we're missing our lovely Frank. And this is drinking, or what are we calling it? Drinking coffee, or just drinking, dirty drinking and making stuff on the fly, or something like that.
Dirty drinking and making shit on the fly.
That's the one. Mine was the nice
version. Simone's doing the nice version. I don't have any nice in me today.
Cool.
So I want to begin today's adventures by acknowledging that I did not do my homework, so you couldn't do yours. I mean, it wasn't so that you couldn't do yours, but I realized that 7 days went by really fast, and I didn't make you an environment in which your person had, or your superhero had to.
You're forgiven. I will try with a bit of therapy, maybe a few access tools, get over it.
I did paint. That's even the worst part. I painted this week, but I finished the painting I was working on last week. And I'm very happy with it. It is above my bed. I know you're supposed to like do things with them other than hang them in your own home, but I'm hanging them in my own home. So I finished I finished one, and then I faux finished a second one, which means that it is hanging, but it may not be done yet. But it's going to hang until I know.
I kind of like that, actually, like just hanging stuff around, because then it like starts talking to you till you can't stand it any longer and you have to take it down and paint it.
Yeah, you literally are like trying to eat dinner, and then you're like, fine, and you just leave your dinner there and take it off the wall and go paint. Yeah. So before we started recording, Simone had asked me, I told her that I was going to do black gesso on this piece and prepare it for to work on, and she said, how are you finding black gesso? And I was like, how did I find it, or do I like it? She's like, well, yeah, what do you think about using it? And I never would have thought, because I use the wood panels, I actually use clear gesso a lot, so that I still have the wood, like the feeling of the wood. But the first big painting that I ever did, I started as a chalkboard. I actually didn't mean to do a painting, but I started making a chalkboard, and then all of a sudden was like, well, this is a lot of big, just blank space. Maybe I'll just do a design up here. And like an hour later, it was a painting. I was like, oh, never mind. And that actually was, and because I had started with the black background on that one, it gave me sort of information about working with a darker background. It does do something different. I would say if you haven't tried it, definitely try it. It's different than like scratchboard or something like that, where it scratches through to something else. Although I guess you could probably do something like that with it. But what I find is that the colors can be really rich.
Yeah.
And then I've been wondering about using a mix of different gessos, sort of like doing underpainting with gesso, like with blacks, whites, grays, and clears.
Well, I know a friend of mine who's a painter. She does a lot of underpainting, and she does a lot of scratching afterwards. Mm-hmm. So, which is an interesting effect. It creates new textures and then colors coming through, and I think it's kind of interesting. Yeah, I personally really like coloring my backgrounds. Mm-hmm. That being said, I'm in a white background phase at the moment.
I want to know what that creates for you. And I'm going to get my dog since she's yelling.
She's yelling at you? Let me just pull that up.
And here I am in that you can't see me yet.
No, I can't. You're right.
But I did start, I downloaded another figure drawing app and started playing.
Ooh.
And so this isn't any, I mean, this is just like the beginnings, but like I realized that I don't actually see what's like, I'm looking at it's a really great exercise in actually seeing what you see and how you see.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, in my head, this looks just like, in my head, all the information is actually already on here, even though there's no information on here.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, this is really good exercise in
Seeing.
Really, but not just seeing, in really getting how you see. Like we think that we see things the way that everybody else sees them. And we think that like, just because I'm looking at a body, that we're looking at the same thing when we look at a body. And, you know, the more I do the figure, like there's two different things that I've done. One is drawing sort of like that. And then the other one was actually in a digital class that I had taken. And it was really recognizing like patches of color, so that you create something out of patches of color, not actually out of shapes. And that was fascinating, because the colors that you think are there are not the colors that are actually there at all. No. You may be looking at what should be flesh tones, but it's like, if you actually look at it, like there's yellows and reds and blues and purples and greens and all sorts of stuff. And that if you build out of the chunks of shape, like right now, like this is like, you would never think in a nose, oh, the light just helped me out. There we go.
Yeah.
Like there's this weird patch right here of a color, like of a like sort of undefinable color. You would never think like that's a nose, right? Like you make this the shape, but this is actually sort of invisible. And here's a patch of color here. Here's a patch of color here. Here's a patch of color here, surrounded by like a V shape of a totally different color. And I never saw the world more vividly. Like when I started doing that and started looking at everything through patches of color, I was like, whoa. So there's a weird mix of both being more aware of the way you see the world and changing the way you see the world by changing what you're asking yourself to perceive. I don't know, fun stuff.
Well, there's a dude that I'll see if I can find him and add him to wherever we're putting. Oh, our Pinterest account. Oh, we have a Pinterest account. Yay!
Oh, yay!
I will make it public today.
Awesome.
Yeah. So this guy, like, I can't remember his name, but he does portraits. But it looks like he's done the portrait and then gone in and then scribbled it all up. So there's pieces of the face still there, but they're like hints of it. And
that's how I see the world. That's actually, that is not like me looking at this person that I started drawing, and I was like, this is how I see them. I don't see things in all their shapes. Wow. What is he like?
I'll look him up. He's he's really cool. One of my students was so enamored with him, and she was actually like, when she first started with me, she was much more sort of representative in her painting, like sort of hyper realistic. And then she saw some of this, because one of the things that the kids had to do, which I thought was a great exercise, they didn't always agree with me, was in the UK, they have art exams. And so you have to take your work and have it based on something. So you know how you were talking about seeing the world, it's starting to recognize where you're inspired and documenting it. And so she saw this guy, and so she then started to pull some of his stuff into what she did, which was really interesting. And it just gave the students like a depth of knowledge about art history, but also a depth of inspiration to draw from, which I thought was pretty cool.
I want has been both a little, like, I don't feel nearly, when I was in high school, I was into writing poetry and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And people were always telling me that I needed to read other poets, and I was so confused by that whole idea.
Yeah.
I was like, but I don't have my voice yet. How am I going to have my voice if I'm constantly looking at everybody else's voice to see what voice to have?
Yeah.
And for me at the time, I felt like I needed to actually develop a voice before like adding to or change, that I was like, I don't even know what I'm doing yet. Like, I'm not going to copy these people until I know what I'm doing, and then I can play with what they're doing.
Yeah.
In a different way. I don't know if I feel that way today, but it is an interesting
thing.
I would say that it's so valuable to copy other people. And I know we're saying be inspired by and not copying, but
well, what's interesting about the school that I worked at, I think a lot of the kids had a longer time to sort of play and find their voice before they took their exams, where I didn't know me at all when I was in high school, because you just didn't have the time to play.
Right.
I don't think that's him.
Yeah, isn't that weird that as you're a kid, like you're like, I don't have time to play.
No, it's just bizarre.
I'm an adult and I can do whatever I want.
I know.
And then you get to be an adult and people don't do what they want.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, here he is. His name's Paul Wright. So I'm just going to share my screen with you, and then you can see what he looks like. So, like, here's this. I just saw this one the other day, which I think is really cool.
That's cool.
Isn't that wild?
Wow, that's fun.
Yeah, he just like gets in there and like, I mean, you could still, your eye fills in everything, which is the cool part.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just does. And some of it,
neat.
Some of it's darker and heavier, and just by like the brush strokes and the subject matter, he can totally change it.
Those are neat.
Yeah. And he's done cityscapes. I'm not as crazy about those, but.
Right. They feel more like they've been done. Like I recognize that. Yeah. Oh, wait, what is that one though? Wait, hold on. Go back up. Oh, the banana's funny. The one your mouse is almost over.
This one?
It's in a bubble. Yeah.
That one's pretty neat.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Oh, is that the Statue of Liberty?
I have a feeling that's in London, that's Piccadilly Circus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was like, I didn't recognize the rest of it. I was like, how is that? Is that looking over something? Anyway, that makes a lot more sense that it's something else.
Yeah. So, but yeah, he's done some neat things. Like, and it really works with movement because he's already moving the paint so much. So.
I thought the one next to that was sort of interesting. It was like a Degas kind of the
window?
No. Oh, that's beautiful.
Mm.
No, I was looking at the one next to the other dancer that you showed.
Oh,
it was like yeah. I was like, oh, that's, and then that's where I go, oh, except for it's two dancers. Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Yes, anyway, thought I'd show you him. And you were asking about the white backgrounds. So this is probably the first one I did. And I like the starkness of it. But I used to like really start on a black background, and then what's cool is you can go in and build it up slowly. Like you can play with like the shading and get it to the point where you want it, and then put the color on top. Yeah. Which is kind of fun. So you've got everything sort of worked out, if you will. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is a bit safe, but it's also kind of cool. So.
Wait, so you think the white is less safe?
The white on the black for me, because I always chalk in my drawings first. Mm-hmm. And then the cool thing is if you chalk them in, you can just take a wet cloth and just wipe away anything that isn't working.
Yeah.
So, but I've always admired those people who just sit down and they're like, cha-ching! And you're like, yeah.
Oh, I tried something this week. I'm looking at my black gesso and I'm like, it's a little thick in here.
Yeah, it seems to thicken a lot faster than the white. I don't know why.
I tried making I did just an experiment, not as a, like, this is my final basket, but I wanted to try something else. So,
ooh, that's really fun. Is that with glue and yarn, or?
Yes, glue and what is this? Twine. I guess this is just. It's not. It's sort of like I don't know. I guess just normal like string.
There's a weaving technique where you take what is it called? Just the basket weaving stuff, whatever that's called, cane maybe.
Uh-huh.
And you do all the regular things, you soak it, but then it's called a crazy basket. And because I don't really like following the rules all that much, it really worked for me. And you make 2 loops, one's bigger than the other, and then you just weave crazily with your different canes in between them, and you get this sort of like crazy yarn thing going on.
Yeah, that's a little bit what I was trying out to see, like, well, does it just stick together? Like, does it work better if it's like completely soaked? Does it work better if it's sort of, so there's a mix of like partially done and that on top of wet, and then there's part that's been really soaked, and yeah, and then I was like, and I did loop, and I sort of played with, oh, well, what if it was just in loops? Do you need to have it have better support than that? Anyway.
Cool. That looks like fun.
An experiment. And I also experimented this week with using chalk pastels, clear gesso. So the piece that I just posted on Facebook that's hanging in my in my dining room right now. I did chalk. That's almost all. That's actually almost all chalk pastels and glue. Yeah.
I thought that was paint. That's really cool. So, what's something that you've always wanted to try and never have, or something like that you've always wondered about?
I'm gonna have to think about that. What about you? I'm like, I oftentimes just do try.
Well, the things that I haven't tried, I think, are because there's a lot of investment in them.
Oh, yeah.
Which is like encaustic. Like you have to have all the stuff.
Oh, I did it. And I did it, but I feel like I actually could have learned a lot from having someone actually show me stuff, and instead I just kind of hopped in and started playing with it. But and so I have a lot of that stuff. I did invest in it. And what I know you can do with it, I got sort of, I didn't do any of the detailed stuff that you can do with it, because you can do really cool like portraits and stuff with it.
Yeah.
And I realized very quickly that I was just like, it's kind of toxic,
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's you don't want to sit over it breathing it, and it's mostly okay, but if you burn it, you're in trouble.
Oh.
And you need to have really good ventilation.
So, that sounds like too much work for me.
Well, there's that. And then like keeping your, it seems like it'd be really great on smaller stuff, so that you can keep the entire surface heated.
Yeah.
I would suggest. But there's also this really cool thing that you can do where you can, what's that called? That you can basically create stamps.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so you basically use a metal plate, and then you can roll
okay.
paper on top of it, so you can create a sort of reproducible piece, which is kind of fun. So there's some cool stuff that you can't do with other mediums with it. That's kind of fun, but it also, and then I started looking at it, and I was like, and then if your piece is really in a hot place, like you actually could remelt your piece, right? And I was like,
suck.
Yeah, I was kind of like, I don't know. Like, is this really? I think you may need a really good reason, especially with all the I don't know. It's kind of fun. You can use a heat gun and stuff on it. That's always fun. So then it responds really differently. It's reworkable in a really interesting way. You can get back to reworkable life in a way that you can't do with other materials just by heating it.
That's pretty cool.
It's sort of the double-edged sword, though, because you're like, well, that means that this is sort of, it probably is rare that somebody will have something hot enough that it actually would cause it to melt.
Yeah.
But you could. At any moment, you could just melt the surface off.
I like things to be a little bit more, what's the word? Not solid, but long-lasting, maybe. I think what I like about it is that translucent thing you can get going on.
There are a lot of mediums that you can play with that are acrylic that do a similar feeling.
I'll have to try that, because that sounds way more fun than my piece melting.
I'm sure if anybody's watching and that actually does encaustic, they're like, you're ridiculous. That is not the thing. Dying of lung cancer, that is something you need to be worrying about. Your piece melting, not actually what you need to be worrying about.
Well, apparently, because I used to be really into set painting, because when I did my first degree, I did everything because I like to learn things. And that was the highest death rate in the theater was usually set painters.
Wait, why?
Because of the lead in the paint.
They still have lead in the paint?
No, not anymore, but when they did, they were the ones that bit the dust probably the quickest.
Huh.
Just because they were using huge volumes all the time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, man, talk about an art that got kind of lost. I mean, these gigantic, beautiful scenes that just got sort of, there's no outlet for that as an art. Like it was just meant to be the background for something, but oh my gosh.
Yeah, I know, like, we would be, like, taking things from previous sets or scenes from other plays and, like, reworking them or painting right over them, And you're like, wow, okay. Actually, I came across, I should check them out again, actually. They were really cool. I don't know where I put them, but I think they were either from a fairground or maybe a theater, and they were all on wood panels, and they were all different characters from Alice in Wonderland.
Oh, wow.
They were very cool.
It'd be sort of interesting to talk to a bunch of different artists where you go, like the difference between I'm just like watching what I'm doing and I'm like, man, if I was doing this in a different context, I'd be really upset that I'm not being more like particular, like more exact. Like this is just a surface, so this part should be completely flat and this part should be, and I'm just like, oh, but my whole thing right now, and it's likely to change, but my whole thing right now is to like break out of the need for perfection.
Yeah.
So art serves a different purpose for me at the moment. It's to like move beyond my need for things to be like right or perfect or flat or straight or even how you're supposed to do them. And it would be interesting to see like how do you use art in that? Like, is the art just for the art's sake, or do you actually play with art beyond, like to sort of self-therapized?
Yeah. I think for me
or express?
I think at one point in my life it was definitely about getting it right.
Uh-huh.
And then I just realized I could spend so much time agonizing if this was like photographically perfect.
Uh-huh.
Or I could have fun. And that fun won over.
Wait, so what changed? So when you went from one to the other, first of all, what changed? And that's kind of a big change to make. Like, did you just change it? Or did you have to sort of like talk yourself through it? Or
well, I'm trying to remember when it actually happened, to be honest. I think it was in university. Mm-hmm. And I get the sense that it was around the time that I discovered the artist Tom Thompson.
Wait, so who's Tom Thompson?
I'll pull him up here and then our audience can also have a look.
I will spare people who I was inspired by in college.
Really? Now I'm so intrigued.
Well, so here's what my art teacher said. She goes, I didn't mean for any of you to actually like this art.
Oh no.
I'm like, oh, sorry.
So this is the kind of stuff he did. And I just fell in love with it.
Oh, wow, yeah.
I think it was really the first time that I got that you could create something with daubs of color that just...
It reminds me a little bit of that piece like that Rebecca showed us last week.
Yes.
Like, yeah. But actually, but seeing the world and doing that, that's fun.
Yeah. So I remember standing like in front of this one and just like...
How big is it?
It's probably about 4 foot by 3 foot or something.
Uh-huh.
A lot of his pieces are fairly big.
Yeah. And
he was a bizarre character. Like his canoe is up here and he decided to take a certain, I think maybe it was Payne's Gray or something. And he painted his entire canoe with artist quality paint. Mm-hmm. Payne's Gray, like wow, okay. And he actually was found dead, and they weren't sure. It's still a mystery today why he was found dead near his canoe. I think he was found drowned, and they don't know if it was misadventure or murder or what it was.
Oh, weird. Huh.
Yeah, so he's got kind of a interesting past.
Huh. That's a whole new meaning of pain is gray. Oh, so this is, I see.
See he's going to be a boxing bunny.
That's fun.
Yep.
Earlier today, it struck me because, like, the piece that's hanging on my dining room wall right now.
Yeah.
Was fairly quick in the making.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at, adding a couple of clear layers to it and then doing another little bit on top of it and sort of allowing, even if I can build it up enough, like allowing for that new layer and only painting on part of it and allowing that new layer to sort of even shadow a little bit the other layer.
Uh-huh.
Like where you can see that there's actually space in between the two. I'm a little bit fascinated with that, like this clear thing, like there being a layer of something and then a clear something and then something on top of the clear layers. I'm a little obsessed with that as an idea. So, to answer your question, I haven't fully played with that. I've only played with it a teeny tiny bit. And I would love to play with it a lot more, like having clear things and things on top of things.
I like that sort of through the looking glass, or like there's this multiple. Like there was a art lesson I did once with the kids where you take you just cut out silhouettes. It doesn't matter what it is. But we did landscapes, and then you layer over tracing paper or vellum or whatever. And then you put another layer of silhouette, another layer of vellum. And so it creates this depth.
Yeah. I did a little bit of stuff with I don't know, what is vellum has it's translucent but not transparent, right?
It's translucent but not transparent, and it's used by architects, so it's a bit thicker than tracing paper.
There's another one that's like that, but it's actually transparent, so it's just like acetate.
Acetate, that's the one.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I did some stuff with that in college, and I would sew stuff onto the acetate. And then play with images behind what I had sewn onto the acetate. That was kind of fun.
Yeah, I'd like to. I have a fascination with textiles, and I haven't really explored it a lot. Because it always ends up looking a little bit crafty.
Yeah.
Get a bit pissed myself.
Is it just skill level or something else?
It's partly skill level, and it's like this granny takes over. You know what's funny when I paint these characters or these animals is I often see people I know in them.
Who's in that one?
This one reminds me of a student I had who is just, he's going to hate me if he recognizes who I'm talking about. He was obsessed with his, like, what he ate and how he looked and, like, going to the gym and, like, oh, you know, I'm getting fat and, like, and he was, like,
what, 12?
No, he was probably about 15 at the time. Okay. And he just wanted to have this sort of sculpted figure, which he did. And but he was never, in my point of view, was never going to be big because he just wasn't built that way. So I said that to him one day because he was complaining that he wasn't getting bigger.
You're right.
And like 2 or 3 weeks later, he got big. It was really funny.
I know you're supposed to wait until your gesso is, that's the whole point. So what would you like to do with textiles? I mean, there are some of the modern day, like some of the contemporary quilters. Oh my God. But what would you like to do?
I really like attaching things to different things and like beading and felting, and I think the felting because you can to a certain degree mix your colors, because if you have wool, you can mix the wool. Where I find the quilting frustrating because I never have the exact right color that I want.
So you need more resources.
I need more resources. I actually wonder if I would be better off, instead of trying to make an art piece, to actually make costume instead.
Oh, that's an interesting idea.
Because we used to do this thing at school where I would get the kids to just use bits of cloth, and I would show them different silhouettes from different periods of history, and then their job was to create that silhouette with the cloth that they had, which was really cool.
That silhouette with the cloth they had, what do you mean?
So for instance, like, let's say you were going for, I don't know, what's a period of history that you're really familiar with?
I'm seeing something French with the big poofy hoop skirts and
like the big white wigs and stuff. So like they might make something out of like, actually we did this. They would stuff grocery bags until they had those big panniers or those big quote unquote hips on the other side. And then they would drape curtain fabric over top so that you get that look. And then we would like pin and staple like, you know, sort of that inverted triangle on their chest, their waist. And then we would use elastic bands to like make the puffed sleeves and stuff just by putting them on their arms. And then we would go out and do photo shoots of, you know, what they might be posing like or doing or.
Fun.
It was really fun.
So the whole thing is sort of like, it doesn't matter how you get to, like if you took all the details out of what the silhouette was, it was just to create the shape of it.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll show you the pictures one day. They're really cool.
Well, too, it's so funny because what I see is like with that, you could, where if you had light shining from behind someone and you see the silhouette and you think you know what it is, only to find out that it's actually like someone carrying fish, you know, like you think you know what it is because it has the silhouette of a shape you recognize.
Yeah. Well, have you seen that couple? They did the garbage silhouettes.
I don't know. There's somebody who does these amazing garbage pieces that only show up like in Atlanta. He's done a few pieces on the Beltline. And you don't know what they are. They just look like piles of trash until you like walk to a certain place. And then you're looking at a phenomenal like painting. And then you walk past and then it's just trash again.
Oh, that's very cool.
But what is it that they're doing?
I'll show you. That's a really different way of doing it though. That's neat. So they just have random jumbles of trash.
Oh yeah, no, those are magical. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think are so cool.
That was funny, the woman peeing. I love how we spend an hour and then it still looks like I haven't done anything. And then like an hour later, like an hour after we get off, then all of a sudden I'll show everybody a picture of what I created after we got off. They're like, you just stood around and painted something black. And I'm like, yeah, that's what you think. Give me 10 more minutes.
I know, it's funny, isn't it? Well, I mean, you have to allow things to dry as well. And I mean, I guess that's what I love about doing the chalk first, is you are like, oh, there is something there. It's self, you know, instant gratification kind of dealio. Plus, it's almost like, because you're wiping away, it's almost like a sculptural thing, like you did with the modeling clay. Like you get that tactile thing going on.
Yeah, that's what I loved about working with. When a long time ago, I used to do a lot of self-portraits with chalk pastels, and just using my hands as the coloring, you know, to color with them. So I would like put some color in, but then it would mainly be about shading with my hands for that sculptural, that same thing.
Do you have any of them?
I trashed almost all of them.
Really?
Even though I loved them, it was weird. There was a lot of stuff that I was like, you know what? I'm going to throw these away. Yeah. But there are also some people who have pieces of mine or had them. I don't know.
Yeah.
But a lot of them were so specific to the time. They come with they come with so much information, and not all of it was that much fun. So I was sort of like, Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't need for this to exist in the world.
Some of my poetry is like that.
This can go now. There was it was Adele actually. Adele and then another musician shortly after, which was really funny. Adele was telling a story on stage, and she said, she's like, I wrote this piece and it really helped me get past this relationship because I was having a really hard time. I was really stuck with it. And I wrote this, and when I wrote this, something changed and it set me free. She goes, but now, like 19 years later, I'm still singing this song. Or like maybe it was 9 years. Anyway, it was like, I'm still singing this song almost every day I go on tour. Like, maybe he did get the last laugh. Like, it's like
oh, that's amazing.
And then there was somebody else, and he was like, yeah, you know what? I did this, and it's kind of a big screw you to this person, except for I'm the one still singing it. Huh. So that was funny to hear 2 times within a couple months.
Well, I know, I also heard lately Adele had, written all of this angsty stuff, and then she wrote these beautiful pieces of being a mom and like just being happy, and her music producers didn't want to know anything about them.
Yeah, exactly. That's like what Ani DeFranco has a line in one of her songs about that too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, about how, except for hers was more like something about like when, except for like something about being happy and having a whole lot less to say.
Yep. Well, people don't really want to know either, which is really weird. Like, I was talking to somebody the other day, and and it wasn't about like, hey, how was your week? What were the cool things that happened? It was like, and then my head and my foot, and then I had to go, and then they like put shots in me, and I was like, okay.
I do realize that I'm very lucky to have such different friendships.
Yeah.
That for the most part, my friendships are actually built out of either people creating things and like, hey, so what can we create here? Hey, what can we create here? Hey, what can we create here? Or, or, ooh, this changed and this changed and this changed.
Yep. And
I'm happy.
Yeah. That happy thing. I appreciate it more and more every day.
Well, it's so funny how many people probably think that happiness is boredom.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, you hit the nail on the head there. That is like, that's a whopper. Whew. That's blowing chunks, man. Yeah. Yeah. Or being happy is having just the right amount of things, or yeah.
Oh yeah, what's that? There's a blessing all about may you have just enough, I don't know, misery to.
Oh yeah.
Just enough this to make you this, just enough this to make you this.
Is it? That's not the Alcoholics Anonymous one, is it?
Wait, what?
It's not the one from Alcoholics Anonymous, is it?
How's that one go?
I don't know. Let me look at a strange turn of conversation.
I was like, I know the 12 steps.
I think it's the prayer.
Oh, like what you'll get out of the, like when you, basically like when you know you've made it, this is how you'll know, that whole bit?
It's one that they borrowed, I think. Hang on. God grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change and courage to change the things I can. That one. Yeah, and there's quite a few steps to the prayer.
Well, I thought that was it. Just God grant me the serenity to accept things I cannot change, the courage to change things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
No, there's a few more. There's a 3rd step, a 7th step, and 11th step.
Wait, what do they have to do with the 7th and 11th step?
Not sure. They're the first time I've ever seen them. One has bondage in it, which I find interesting.
Something tells me that it's not bondage.
It's not the fun kind of bondage.
Something tells me.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Unfortunately.
Something tells me, oh, I need nails.
I assume the ones that come on the end of your fingers.
No. I have been, speaking of playing with, so one of the other things I thought about the other day is once I was playing with the string, I was like, oh, well, it could be really fun. So I play a lot with spraying water and play a lot with letting things drip. And I've enjoyed playing with it and letting it go willy-nilly and do what it would like. But it would also be fun to do some stuff with string and sort of see how interrupting the flows of water and stuff, how what that could actually create in a piece.
What's that one? It was a science thing with magnets. How you can interrupt the flow with magnets.
Well, that's kind of interesting. Oh, that's, so one thing I did want to play with that I haven't played with, another thing, so I didn't think there was anything, I lied, is sound waves.
Ooh, yeah.
So using sound waves to affect the patterning in particulates.
That would be fun.
Yeah. That's kind of another thing that takes equipment.
Yes. It's yeah, those situations, it's too bad, like, you not to have access to like a group of artists that do different things, so you can like go play.
Mm-hmm. That'd actually be fun. A play place for artists.
Exactly.
What all? Okay, so if we were equipping a play, if we were just going to create it, and we wanted a play place, so we need a room with amazing ventilation.
Yes.
We need a few of those, so we don't subject everybody to awful. So we need a place to play with encaustics with so here's a new wish list with gigantic heaters so that you could do huge pieces with, your piece.
Wear bikinis.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking. Around hot wax. That's a like.
Really good idea. I think I've got something there.
Yeah. This is not the kind. This is wax and resin.
It's like when my boyfriend decides to cook in his boxer shorts. I think that's really funny.
I'm just gonna fry this right up. Ow!
Yep.
Okay. So we need bikinis for Simone, and we need a heat-proof apron for me. and then gigantic heaters so that we can keep entire gigantic pieces alive while working on them. And then, because I can't start small, because why bother?
Sure.
Why not ruin gigantic pieces instead of tiny ones?
Well, you can always remelt them.
Yeah, and at a certain point, that is something that all of a sudden they become.
Is it like oil painting where it just goes to mud?
Yeah, at a certain point, it's just mud. Like it's no good. Okay, so gigantic heaters and little heaters for people who want to start small and who are smart, and good ventilation, and also all the stuff that you could ever want. So all the heat tools that you could use for that. And then we need a glass blowing and a.
Oh yeah, I've always wanted to do that.
And then what are the other ones? The gigantic vacuum kilns. So we need a vacuum kiln.
What's a vacuum kiln?
A vacuum kiln there are these pieces that you can make. So basically, if I was going to make a glass bowl and I wasn't going to blow it, I could do it in a glass vacuum kiln. So you would have a mold shape, and then you would place sheets of glass, and it takes, imagine a matching mold on top and bottom, right? So it's a bowl, so you'd have your matching molds. This is how I understand it. I might be totally wrong. And so you could put your sheets of glass there, and then you start the vacuum kiln and basically be like, And so it heats the whole thing and then presses pieces together. So you would basically do either sheets or rods or whatever of glass in the different colors and stuff, and then it presses it together and makes those pieces combine.
To know what else is possible with that, because I've seen so much of the same stuff with that technique. Like it.
Yeah, you could only do what's already been done.
Anyway, I would also like a raku kiln.
Okay, so there's also a raku kiln there and a regular kiln, except for fucking enormous. So we could do huge sculptural pieces. Mm-hmm. Which also means we need an iron pour.
What's that?
The stuff required to pour iron in.
Ooh, so like a metal doodah.
Smithery.
Yep.
And then of course the regular stuff like watercolor, but all the magical watercolor things. Ooh, and then a pigment center for. Ooh. Yeah. What?
Also like a glaze center. There was one at my university where people basically just played around with making new cool glazes.
Uh-huh. Cool. So a glaze play area and chemistry concoctionariness.
Kind of like a mad scientist lab, really.
Okay, and then a mad scientist lab, absolutely. Well then I guess while we're doing that, we need a culinary sculptural center.
Oh, like where they make butter statues?
Yes! I saw Paul Kieran did an entire flower sculpture out of chocolate. He also made chocolate bars for the Good Girls Guide to Being Wrong and Happy.
Yay! That's amazing.
Called the Good Girls Love Good Chocolate. So they're branded. The Good Girls Love Good Chocolate.
I love it.
Yes. Chocolatasm. If anybody else wants to buy the Good Girls Love Good chocolate bar, you can get one there. I think Chocolatasm. A mix between chocolate and orgasm. Mm-hmm.
That's very cool.
So what else do we need in our
I guess this would go in like the toxic area. Like I'd love to the resin, like that pouring resin stuff, like on top of paintings and stuff, that looks really fun. Mm-hmm. And like
I'm trying to think of how to make an area where it would make that easy. Because the first 10 minutes of wearing a respirator, you're like, why is everybody complaining? This is so easy. I can breathe just fine. And then all of a sudden you're like, like 45 minutes in, it's like, get this mask off of me. Oh my God. And keeping drips off of the back of your piece and all of that stuff. And like, bleh.
Gotta be a better way.
That's what I'm like, oh, and inevitably I was doing it in some place where, a bug would make it in, and somehow other people didn't manage to get bugs in their pieces all the time. I would do it in the same location and end up with like a mosquito in one and end up with like a little baby fly in another one.
Maybe you're like a bug whisperer, or maybe you're the harbinger of death for bugs.
I think I'm the harbinger of death for bugs. It's not true. That's not true. I think I'm the bug whisperer. No, I think they're like, oh, she doesn't hate us.
Yeah.
Do.
It's stuck. Forever crystallized.
Maybe that's why. Maybe it's that they know that I love amber and things trapped in it. And they're like, you'll love this. You
could have worked with the bug mummification. Like you could have really like.
Maybe I should have been pouring resin into little ice cube containers and then asking for bugs to come in and mummify themselves.
Yeah. I had this art teacher that taught before me at the school that I worked at, and he was obsessed with decaying things. Mm-hmm. So I found like the science goldfish were like drying out on the one of the shelves. And one of the kids was playing with like just a small amount of resin. I was like, oh, what happens if I pour the resin on the goldfish? So one side of the goldfish forever stayed young, and the other side slowly got drier and more crinklier.
Oh, that's fun. That speaks to me somehow.
I know, it's pretty cool.
The okay, so now I'll reveal. So the artist that I was so just inspired, like, you know those pieces that you go and you're like, oh my God, this is possible.
Yeah.
Was this artist who he made a book. When I ended up loving the way I had just seen his work and fell in love with it, and then read how he wrote about his work, and I was re-enamored, and then I also understood what it was that I actually had seen in the work in the first place.
Okay.
Because what most people see in the work is really morbid. Like, you know, people have reactions. Like, that's why my art teacher was like, you were supposed to have a reaction like, oh my God, or this is disgusting, or no way, or be offended, or be scared, and instead I'm like, ah! So he took this entire book of like, or not, it wasn't a book at the time, but he was inspired by all these different painters and stuff who had done still lifes. So he did photographic still lifes that sort of mimic these other still lifes, except for they're made out of like cadaver parts. So it was like cadavers and heads and like, and then he would do all this work with people with deformities. So like people with no legs, or a lot of work with hermaphrodites, or, you know, work with people with like strangely like bodies that didn't fit within the normal range of either body size or shape or ability. So people missing limbs, or people with like additional breasts, or people with just like all this different kind of stuff, like people who would be considered circus freaks at one point, right?
Right.
And but when I would see the portraits, I would never, because he would do these portraits or these weird things. Oh, the 9 Inch Nails like that that was pretty much based on this guy's pieces. So with the heart sort of rotating around and the pig head on a spit, like that stuff. Okay, so it should be dark, but what I kept seeing in it was that there was so much beauty that I didn't bother to like see the ugly in it, because it was just filled with so much regard and beauty. Like that was the energy of them, was regard. Like perverted, for most people would call it perverted regard.
Yeah.
And I mean, because there's like one where there's a cadaver being hung by anyway, I won't describe that one lest I make some people pass out. But then like there's another one where there's a horse sort of like up, and so there's a woman like right at the horse's penis. So right, like there's things that there's lots of ways people could be offended by his pieces. But then whenever I went and I read like what he was actually looking at when he was creating these things, it basically was like, I look at these people and all I see is this, like I see this really different beauty in them. And I was like, that's what I saw every time I looked at the pieces, was I saw whatever it was that I saw what he was looking at with them. So anyway, Joel Peter Witkin, if you want to look up Joel Peter Witkin.
He's not the same guy that does, like, there's a guy that like takes out different parts of the body. Like some of them there's one piece he does, I don't know how I don't know if it's the way he plasticizes the cadavers, but they're actual cadavers.
Yeah, these are cadavers too, like cadavers and circus people and other people. But
I don't think this guy used circus people, but then he would do things like he would just take out the nervous system and show that.
Oh, that's a different guy.
That's a different guy.
Yeah, and then there were two groups of people doing that. There was the guy who started it, and he had permission, and it was actually a really amazing project. There's another one that's actually been traveling around in addition to that one, because they both travel the globe. but one of them is full of people who might be missing.
Oh.
Yeah. One of them is it's either Chinese, I think, anyway, it's anyway, there was some controversy around how they had obtained the bodies.
Oh.
Whereas the guy I think you're talking about was actually a German. He was like a German scientist or something.
But what was weird is
surprise.
I think in Europe he could show it as art, but when he went to North America, he had to show it as a science exhibit.
Interesting.
Kind of
That's interesting.
Yes.
So here we go. Images. I'm going to show you. All right, here we go. I will share my screen with you. This just became an R-rated.
Oh wow.
But like,
yeah, they're definitely dark, but I see what you mean. There's some interesting historical references too, like.
Yeah, well, that's what the pieces are almost all like the work he was doing a long time ago. All were really related to like paintings and stuff that had been done in other.
That's fascinating.
There are a lot of references to other, like you definitely get the different bits that are other paintings in this one, you know?
Yeah. Did you ever see that film called Miss Henderson Presents?
I don't think so.
It's got Judi Dench in it. It's a true story about a woman who she wanted to create a performance for the soldiers that would lift their spirits, but it was illegal to do any kind of nudity.
Okay.
In London or in the UK that was live.
Okay.
However, if said nudes were still, absolutely still, like as in a, not plateau, tableau,
okay,
then it was legal. That was the loophole. So she used to reconstruct all these famous paintings using all these young women that were nude, but because they were still, it was legal.
Wow, that's so interesting.
That looks like Picasso.
Yeah, but they're photographs.
Wow. So, like, are some of the people real, or are they all cadavers?
No, he also used live people.
I wonder how the live people felt like about playing with cadavers.
Well, they're not all, I mean, they're not all, his whole thing wasn't all cadavers.
No.
Although, I mean, right, you have a live person, cadaver.
How he's live.
Cadaver painting.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, that was the thing, like I had never seen, that was one of the things that was so cool too, is I was like, I had never seen anything like this. This was unlike, like this is one of those things where you're like, this person's brain works in a really different, like in a way that I had never really.
I know several of my high school students that would have been like, oh my God, this is so cool.
This is that place where it's like when you mix stuff that's both, like it's so much more offensive whenever it's not also so amazingly done, you know, like where you're like, no, there was skill here in addition to all the other stuff. Like there's amazing skill.
Yeah.
And these were all on at a time whenever, like, these are all big plate stuff. So and then so he would also then do scratchings and stuff into the negatives and stuff after they were created. I mean, after they were.
No, it's really, really interesting. I mean, I could definitely teach an art lesson on this guy.
Yeah, I want to hear it. Oh, maybe we should add that to our things, art lessons.
Yeah.
That could be fun.
Yeah, I could come up with something for next week and just put it out there. Maybe I'll film myself or something doing it on the weekend. Because that's something I also would like to do more of is collage. I really like doing that.
Well, that was the weird thing though. These aren't collages.
No, I know.
I mean, I love anyway, but it could be really cool to, I want to see.
Yeah.
I want to see what you do. I want to see what you create.
That's super cool. Wow. It has such a visceral thing that, you know, it's not, you can't ignore it for sure.
I think that was one of the things. There's been a lot of, okay, I'm going to stop sharing. Especially like from that time through my late 20s. And this is something that if you go, wow, let's acknowledge something that you've changed over the years. This would be something that has changed a lot. I could not figure out how to get out of my head.
Right.
And so like I looked for a church that was like, that would deal with somebody like me. And at the same time, also move from being in my head to being in my body and in my, like being with my body, being with like functioning from like heart and body instead of brain.
Yeah.
And that was interesting. And then, that almost sort of barely worked a little bit. And then I would say that's one of the things over the last 3 years has changed dynamically, that whenever I look at that, I'm like, oh, I don't function from my brain like I used to. Like now I actually am available all at the same time. Like there's no separation, or not nearly as much separation between, how most people are like, my brain says this, my body says this, my heart says this.
Yeah.
And it was so separate for such a long time. And there's a lot of support for that. There's a lot of support for those things being separate and sort of, talking about them separately, expressing them separately. And I would say over the last 3 years, that's diminished, so that there's not that much difference between all of them.
That's very cool.
I think it makes art really different too, because then you kind of look and it's like, oh, that, where I looked at the piece that's upstairs and was like, would I let myself let that be art, let art be that easy?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh man, when you function without the separation between brain, body, heart, expression, like so many people are like, I'm trying to express who I am, like as if there's a separation between that and what you create. And I'm like, there doesn't have to be a separation between that and what you create. And when it's the same thing, there's no angst about it. There's nothing dark you have to express. Like all of a sudden you're just like, oh no, I just made some stuff. Well, that's commercial or shallow. And you're like, no, I can't make something shallow. Like it doesn't.
That's funny that you're saying that. I'm like, this is starting to look like Bugs Bunny. And I'm like, grr. That is funny.
So was I talking to you? You can't make something shallow.
I actually did this piece because I was so annoyed at all of the like, we must be deep kind of stuff in art school. I was like, ugh, can't handle any more of this. So I made this painting and then I covered it that I really liked. I still have it today. It's very Disneyland. It has this like joyful village with a moon and a blah, blah, blah. And so but I didn't want to wreck it because I liked it. So I put cling film over it and then pretended to paint. Well, I painted on the cling film and then that was my expression or whatever. And then I ripped off the cling film or something. I can't even remember what I did.
That's so deep of you. Samantha.
I know. It's so funny because recently I switched jobs, and so I'm no longer teaching art full time. And I always used to say to my students, you know, just make shit up. Like, if you have to be meaningful, just bullshit. And they're like, okay. And so then their new teacher, they were like, yeah, I know, I need more bullshit. And he comes from a real sort of art background, you know, where I was much more design and I didn't really, whatever. And he was like, bullshit? Like, what do you mean? That's like your meaning, your deep feelings.
Well, that's what I'm looking at. Like, you're not allowed to be happy. Like, happiness is a lie. As far as art is concerned, happiness is a lie. You are lying to yourself if you're happy. So get to the real you. And I'm like, the real me might be a Disney castle. Like, leave me alone.
Yeah.
Who are you to say?
Well, and that's back to that commercial thing, because I mean, I'm not saying that there's a lot of happy people out there, but I'm not sure there is. But I find like art that is happy seems to appeal to the masses much more than a lot of the meaningful, dark stuff. And
You mean not everybody has a Joel Peter Witkin piece on their wall?
No, not so much that, because I mean, he's different, but I mean like the dark, angsty stuff. Like, I don't consider him dark and angsty.
I think a lot of people would disagree with you.
I know.
But I get it, because the second I saw it, like I told you, like I didn't see what other people were seeing in it, where they were like, and I was like, wait, why are you what? Like
there's this cafe in Denmark, and I think it's called the Rats Cafe or something like that. And it's in Copenhagen, and it's filled with these taxidermy animals everywhere, of every description.
Wait, we went there.
I think we did.
I went there with you. Like one of the antelope things has paint all over it. Oh yeah, and it has the doll head lights and stuff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which I thought was so much fun, and they all feel like they're looking at you. And somebody I went with, they were like, "No, I can't be in here. I don't like this place." And I was like, "Oh, okay."
It wasn't me. I was like, "This place is awesome."
Yeah, I went there a few times just because and food was okay, but the ambiance was great.
Let's just go ahead and say we might have a different point of view.
This is true.
Maybe a lot of other people, to look at Joel Peter Witkin and not see dark and angsty.
Yeah, I remember seeing this picture from like the Holocaust that was, I mean, it was tragic and awful in so many ways, and yet the way the photographer had captured this young girl that had obviously died a horrible death was so beautiful. Like the textures and the contrast, I was like, it's gorgeous. Yeah.
Well, this is a really interesting, and it's time to wrap up because we've been at this for an hour again, and I still don't have anything on my canvas, but looking at like, I wonder, asking people to think about something for a week, like it'd be sort of interesting where, what is it, like we're often told not to see the beauty in things that are tragic, right? So for the most part, someone might hear you say that and even say that you're wrong and you're awful and you're mean and you're a bad person. I can't even come up with all the things that they might say because it's like not quite in my world, but it's like that because what happened was awful, that the piece can't be beautiful, or even the way. So it could be considered an honoring of, for someone to still see the beauty and be like, I wouldn't have chosen for this to happen to you. And I get that what happened to you is awful. And I'm, but like, it didn't stop you from being beautiful. And what if your beauty was an honoring of the world instead of a tragedy? Instead, we sort of want to pitch everything like once it's a tragedy, it should stay a tragedy and it should be forced to be a tragedy forever and ever.
Yeah.
So what, that's such a charged subject because, like the Holocaust is a really charged thing to look at that people may not be able to tease apart, that something can be horrible and beautiful at the same time. Not all the people dying. That is not what I'm saying. I'm not saying the Holocaust was a beautiful thing. That is not what I'm saying. If that's what you just heard, I apologize that that's what you just heard. That is not what I said, and that's not what I meant. But I get that it can be hard to hear because that is a charged subject. So if in our own lives though, we actually take a moment or something where we've been so entrained to the sadness of something or the meanness of something or the wrongness of something. And I wonder what would happen if we took those times and actually recognized any little inkling of it that we can that actually was beautiful.
Or that was funny too, because there's a lot of dark humor out there that, and my sense of it is, whether it's beauty or humor, it gives you that glimmer of light in the darkness, that glimmer of hope that there is a sense of something else possible, rather than, life is all awful all the time. You know what I mean? And I mean, that period of history, there was a lot of awful. But it reminds me of that film, Life is Beautiful, where have you seen it? The Italian film?
I don't know if I have.
Anyway, basically it's this man and this young boy who get put into a prisoner of war camp in I think they're in Germany, or they could be in Siberia. I'm not sure. And he makes it like a game so that the little boy doesn't get scared. And so he gets points for hiding, and he gets, so there's all of this thing that happens. And so he creates this, what should be a horrible, terrible situation into a world and the little boy's not fooled. He knows that there's something that's not right and something going on, but his dad makes it this adventure.
Right.
Rather than, are we going to survive,
Well, that's so interesting because it's like either way you're doing this. I think that we're bumping up against something where it's the rightness again. It's sort of like the rightness of something being wrong or miserable or taking something a certain way, instead of where you go, you know what, I'm going to be hiding anyway, right? Like the verbs are going to be the same, right? Like the verb hiding will be there. Now I'm either hiding and I make it fun, or I'm hiding and I terrify myself, and, or I'm, jumping and I make it an adventure, or I'm jumping and I'm making it scary. And there are all these different places in our life and in art, like whichever way you look at it, where, the verb is going to be the same. Like the verb doesn't change. Like that's the next action required. And the choice is actually what you do. What is the adverb? Like you have choice in the adverb that you're using. The description or how you choose to go about it. Yeah. I've had a lot of things in my life over the last couple of weeks or months. Actually, the last couple of months have been full of changes in relationships that were instigated by stuff that, if you go, well, did you choose that? I'm like, well, I'm not sure when or how, because this part didn't feel like my choice. But now what I do with this is my choice. There's been a lot of that, like everything. And I don't just mean the presidency. So that's a big one too. Like I get somewhere along the line, like this is a choice that we've all made. How we got here, what exactly got here, I'm not sure. But we're here now. And so, now we have actions to take and we have ways that we'll deal with it. But I mean, it's been my personal life too. So, different personal relationships where actions that other people have taken just had me really relook at what works to have these people or not in my life in the way that I had them in my life. And those are moments where you're like, I didn't want to make this decision. Like, I didn't want to go here. Like, this part was not what I wanted to, but now this affects me in a really strong way. And I have to make choices that I didn't want to make. And so, I can either have the point of view of, this is awful. This is, I shouldn't have to make this choice. Or it can be like, wow, level up, new choices, right? Same thing. Making new choices and choosing for it to either be a fun adventure and wondering what happens next, or to get stuck in the tragedy, sadness, angst, anger, and, frustration of changes that you didn't plan on.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, sometimes, like you say, sometimes you're like, I'm not sure how I got here. And then there are other times you can almost pinpoint that choice that you're like, that moment of unconsciousness, and now I'm here.
Yeah, okay. I can't, if I'm honest, I can pinpoint, but it was such a it was like, but it wasn't to end up here. It was like, really? Like you're right. The moment of unconsciousness, where I was like, well, I could do that for a little while.
Yes.
That was the moment. I could do that for a little while. That was the moment. And that was not actually looking at what something creates in the future, or, what else. Anyway, that, not looking. But then you're like well into it. You're like years down the road. And you are at the effect of your stupider self,
Yeah. But the cool thing is that you can change it. It's not like, Lord of the Rings, where you're like, oh, I'm screwed.
I made one choice and now forever has been tainted.
Yeah, now I'm forever stuck in a cave with a ring that I can't stop kissing or licking or whatever.
I don't know. I think a lot of people have, those rings that they can't stop kissing or licking, even though it makes them miserable and unhappy. But I chose this precious thing.
Precious. Yeah.
My precious, miserable relationship.
It's not really a beauty regime, is it? Oh, that's funny. Oh boy.
Just kidding.
So what's our challenge for this week?
Well, I still haven't given you a place for your, do you want to do that one?
Well, what we could do is, it could be a fun thing that we do next week, where you create the scene while I draw what I think should be in the scene, which means it'll constantly have to change.
At the same time? Okay, and I'm going to collect, this is going to be fun, because you said you wanted to do more collage. I will actually collect bits and see about doing it in a collage.
Oh, that'd be fun. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
cling film on top. We can print your thing on acetate, and then I can stitch it to whatever I make.
Like it.
Lick it or like it?
I like it. I lick it.
Like it real good. Mm-hmm.
There was this thing that an English teacher told me once, and it was this kid who had written this, I guess, story or book report or whatever, and he was like, he'd misspelled like, and he'd misspelled good, and he said, I lick it because it is God.
That, more people should say that. I think that should be part of more conversations. I lick it because it is God.
And on that note.
Till next week.